Hello everyone, welcome to week 7. And this week we're reading chapter 9 on the judiciary and Michelle Alexander's introduction and chapter 1 of the new Jim Crow. So I just wanted to go over a few things and point out, I know that you have, and a reminder also, we have our discussion posting, which I've already laid out, the questions that are due this Sunday. So as you're thinking about the text and the chapter and how they go together, and to think about some of the question prompt and some of the issues that really arise when we begin to reflect upon the textual evidence. As you're developing your responses, I just wanted to point out a few things on the new Jim Crow, on very important, what is Michelle Alexander's argument? What are some of her key concepts? What is the new Jim Crow? So first, I want us to really pay attention to what are her 3 systems of racialized social control, and what does she mean by this term, racialized social control, and and one thing when we're thinking about how these systems continue is we see history not as a set of discrete events, not as history repeats itself as the cliche goes. That's not true. History is continuous. It is linked. Our present is linked from these past occurrences and the opposition of forces into the present moment. So when we're looking at the U.S. government and its foundation and its development to the present day, we know that slavery was a big part of that formation, especially in the political economic sense. Right? But it has also formed the first system of racialized social control in this nation. That ends during the Civil War era. And secondly, this is a shift, a transformation into what we know as Jim Crow. Whether we call it Jim Crow, which is how we study in our history books, or we call it racial apartheid, separation by race by law, or and how that was created with the establishment in the ruling in Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, which sets the legal grounding for Jim Crow, which is not overturned until the famous 1954 Brown versus Board of Education case. So that is the ending of apartheid by law, or de jure. Mass incarceration. This is the present term. This is a present period that defines our present society. So Michelle Alexander is making a claim that this is the continuation of specific forms of human rights violations. Right? So this idea that horrific events just occurred as something in the past and that we've moved on and have created a new society are challenged by Professor Alexander in the new Jim Crow. What she highlights and she contends is that this system continues to reinvent itself in new ways. So mass incarceration, and I put the page numbers here so you can follow in the reading. In the U.S., mass incarceration, this concept is not simply about putting people in jails. So it emerges as a stunningly comprehensive and well-disguised system of racialized social control that functions similarly to Jim Crow. And again, this refers not only to the criminal justice system, but also to the larger web of laws, rules, policies, and customs that control those labeled criminals both in and out of prison. So that is the development of that central concept. Now, what is the central argument? Is that mass incarceration is metaphorically the new Jim Crow, as the name of her title, and that all those who care about social justice should fully commit themselves to dismantling this new racial caste system. Fix that typo. So as we're thinking about what is this term, and something that she thought about in laying out this book, she prefaces by saying that this book is not for everybody. This challenges our assumption of how government ought to work, right? Ideally, as what is laid out in chapter 9. But there are some empirical facets of our story, meaning our history in the United States, that really complicates that universality of the application of justice. So racial caste, what is this? Page 12. It is used in common parlance to denote a stigmatized racial group locked into an inferior position by law and custom. And this is a key concept. And it is a provocative concept, because something that we think of when we think of caste, we think that of something that is hardened, something that belongs in other societies. Namely, we think of the caste system in India, where whatever you're born into, that is what you are destined to exist in for the rest of your life. Whether you are a Dalit, the untouchable class, or the Brahmin or the priestly class at the top, that is your destiny. So this is a very provocative concept to think about how certain racial groups have been created to remain in a certain level of hierarchy. But I think Michelle Alexander really lays the ground to allow us to see how that works. So colorblindness, what is this? This is the widespread belief here on page 12 also, that race no longer matters. But in reality, this has blinded us to the realities of race in our society and facilitated the emergence of a new caste system. So we've all heard this term before. We've all heard the saying, I don't see color, I see humans. That's the ideal. But what we've been studying is following that tradition of inegalitarianism alongside classical liberalism and classical republicanism in our founding, shows that race really does matter and has mattered and continues to matter, as made very, very clear in our current context. Pick up any news outlet today, turn on the TV today, and you will see how race matters. But maybe some folks are arguing that race should not matter, it hasn't mattered. So that's colorblindness. People who fail to see the reality of how race operates in the social, political, and economic structure. Bacon's Rebellion is another key moment that Michelle Alexander covers in her text. And this is something that a key moment where the policing, the discipline, and the acquisition of land, the domination over racialized labor begins to emerge in this period. And this is up in chapter 1, where you can go back and really chronicle how this moment plays a pivotal role in shaping the political economy in that moment, but also the policing and of the black population. We're not going over the Stoner Rebellion, but the racial bribe is another concept on page 25 that Professor Alexander details. And here's a clip of Tim Wise that you can click on and watch this. It gives us a brief, it's about a 9-minute clip on really giving us a broad overview of history and how the racial bribe really worked to cement the racialized political economic hierarchy. Law and Order, not the television show, but this is how Professor Alexander goes into detail in how this concept worked to serve political candidates and really develop consensus on the tough on crime issues. And the resistance of those in the South to moves that to deal with the issues of integration. So as I end here, and now we come to the contemporary moment, the Law and Order candidate. But I just want to end by noting, as we reflect upon this and as we're thinking about our next exam on the end of week 9, which is due Sunday, October 15th, is to think critically about these textbook chapters. And this is obviously a very subjective interpretation of how the law functions, but upheld with material evidence to uphold some of the claims made here. They are provocative, that's the intent. But I also advise that we watch the documentary 13th on Netflix. And it's not required, but I think this will be of assistance in providing the visual aspect to what you're reading and also provide for a better understanding. So for that, I will see you. Contact me anytime via email, virtual office hour. Come by my office in person, and I will see you shortly.